Hi guys, I'm Natalie and I am a military spouse and my husband is stationed here in Okinawa, Japan, and we've been here for a little over 4 years. And the main reason that I wanted to make this video is to kind of document my journey through my second pregnancy and what I think makes that unique and noteworthy, and why I want to capture it is because I'll be having my second birth off base. So for my daughter 2 years ago, I delivered her off base at a birthing center kind of right outside Kadena Gate 3. It's called YUI. And for this pregnancy, I'm just entering my second trimester and planning to be seen at YUI and both simultaneously for a while be seen at the Naval Hospital and at YUI, and then ultimately deliver my second baby girl at YUI in the early spring. So that's my plan, and part of why I wanted to create this is documentation for myself, but also I wanted to kind of talk about some of the differences between the Navy Medical Center and YUI for childbirth, and part of my own process of coming to that decision to give birth at YUI instead of at the Navy Medical Center. So I'm gonna film this. Hopefully it's okay, hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully it can be useful as a resource to some people who are also considering YUI and kind of want to make some of those comparisons for themselves. And if not, that's okay too. This will satisfy some of my boredom. So here we go. So currently I'm only about 14 weeks pregnant, and I'm pregnant again with my second child. And right now I've only had 2 appointments so far. So I've had 1 appointment at YUI very early on at 8 weeks to just see the baby, confirm its existence, do some initial measurements, and YUI confirmed that they gave me a due date of March 10th. So wonderful. So it's a very quick in and out appointment. And then I also had the same thing, a dating ultrasound at either 10 or 11 weeks at the Navy Medical Center. So at this point, there's not a whole lot of differences between the care provided in both of those scenarios, because they're ultrasounds to date the baby and confirm your due date, make sure everything's going okay. But as I go throughout this process, I have my next appointment coming up in a few weeks at Naval, as well as my next appointment where I will hopefully confirm that I'm officially a patient again at YUI in the next few weeks as well. So as I go throughout that, I'm gonna try to film at my first real will you take me, will you officially take me appointment at YUI, and film kind of some of the process of how you go through your appointments there. That might sound kind of strange, but appointments at YUI are significantly longer than the ones at Naval, which you could look at as a positive or a negative, depending on how you want to look at it. I just choose to think of them as different. And that's a lot of times kind of what it comes down to me, is not that one is dramatically superior so much as it is different, and I prefer YUI's approach. So I'll kind of be going through some of those differences as my pregnancy progresses, but the times are definitely one of the big differences, is that you might need to allot 30 minutes for your appointment at Naval, and realistically it's so short. And then at YUI, you know, they're gonna do a urine sample every single time you go in. You're gonna be waiting in the waiting room for a while. I know later in my pregnancy with my first daughter that they did an ultrasound if I wanted it every single time I went in. So all of that adds up to sometimes being 2 or 3 hours for an appointment, but it's a nice relaxing place to be. So if that sounds terrible, it's really not. So I guess since at this point, I really haven't seen a whole lot of dramatic differences because I'm so incredibly early, and I'll just document that later, I wanted to talk about some of the reasons why I chose YUI as opposed to staying at the Navy Medical Center. And that's information that might be interesting or helpful to other people. Maybe, I don't know. So first of all, just to clarify, I did not decide to go to YUI in a huff, in a fit of rage, because I hate the Naval Medical Center. That is not at all my circumstance or my situation. And I feel like that's important to mention because for one, my husband's actually a Navy nurse. So he worked at the Naval Medical Center at the same time as I was opting to go off base to YUI. And some people asked me about that at the time, like, Oh, okay, so your husband works at Naval and you don't want to be seen there. Ah, like they had caught me letting out some information about how inept our providers are and the hospital staff is. And that is simply not true. That's not a belief that I hold. In fact, I get really offended and defensive when people talk about our staff and providers and nurses and corpsmen at the medical center as though they are just poorly qualified, because that is simply untrue. That's not true. So for me, the main decision between the Naval Medical Center in Okinawa and YUI is really just the decision between a larger, we'll just say a big American hospital that handles births like a big American hospital would versus a small birthing center that is very selective about the patients that they can take in. And by that, I mean that they're only accepting people who they expect to have healthy pregnancies. So it's a very calm, peaceful place. They're not expecting you to have any sort of complication. They're there to care for you. They have time for that because they have a small number of patients that they're accepting per month. And it's just a different philosophy of care. So of course, what I found at YUI was not the same as the style of care and the type of care and the attention that I would find at the Naval Medical Center, nor would I expect it to be, because they're very different places. So I kind of liken it to, even though both of my babies will be born at YUI, hopefully they'll take me. I don't know why they wouldn't, but even though both of my babies will be born in Okinawa, I liken it to what it would be like if I was in the States. If we were PCSing just a few months earlier and I had to deliver my second daughter somewhere in America, I would also try to find a birthing center, because I'm just not a big fan of the big American hospital, sterile, you're sick sort of approach to pregnancy. Because, I feel like in a big American hospital, I'm treated like I'm sick when I'm not. I'm just pregnant. I don't want interventions. I don't want people monitoring me. If I'm not sick, I'm not sick. I'm healthy. Just let me do my labor thing. And they're not going to allow that. I mean, I know it happens for some people, but a lot of times that's not going to be, I can't rely on that as much at Naval as I can at YUI. I felt very secure at YUI knowing that I'd had a healthy pregnancy. They had been monitoring me. They knew my preferences, that I didn't want to be monitored. That's not really how they do things there anyway. And I was able to successfully go through my labor and delivery fully natural. It was just me and my husband and my doula there until the point where I was pushing, and I was in a room by myself, not hooked up to anything, just doing my labor thing. And that's what I wanted. And I felt like I had a greater chance of success of doing that in a peaceful, calm way with no interruptions at YUI, and I did. Is that to say that could never happen at Naval? No, that's not to say that. But there's a lot more people working there. There's a lot more factors. The environment is just not really what I for me, I've heard people say, oh, well, I'm not seeking some sort of experience in giving birth. I'm just trying to have a baby. But birth is going to be an experience. And through all of my friends and family and people that I've talked to very intimately about birth, I've realized that pretty much everybody has an experience, whether that's what they go into wanting or not. And so the question is, what kind of experience do I want to try to foster? And for me, it's peaceful, it's gentle, it's lights dim, nobody talking to me or messing with me. It's no monitoring. That's what I wanted. So because that's what I wanted, I just don't feel like that really fits into a big American hospital setting as easily or gracefully or reliably. And so for me, that's a big part of why I chose Naval, and it was the right decision for me. So there's a few misconceptions about choosing to go to YUI, and I think a lot of those have really improved in the past 2 years. In the past longer than 2 years, because since I was pregnant with my first daughter, the birthing off base page was created during my first pregnancy. That's been a great resource. It's grown dramatically, and that has been a great way for people to search through old comments, find answers to questions, ask new questions, and get those answered in a really positive, helpful birthing community. So that's been really, really, really great. So a lot of that I think a lot of the misconceptions have gone away somewhat. But one of the biggest misconceptions and fears that I had when I chose to transfer off base with my first daughter was that I had heard it was going to be really difficult to transfer, that it was going to be a really big headache, and that TRICARE was going to hassle me about switching. And to clarify too, this was before the whole open enrollment period was required. There are ways to get around that. And if you've been on the birthing off base page and you're watching this, because I'll probably post it there, I don't know. If you're watching this thinking, oh, well, how can I get around it? There are ways that I know my doula, Diana Harrison, has posted about, and other people have posted about too, other doulas and birth educators. So there are ways around that. But 2 years ago, it was really easy to switch to TRICARE Select. You just called and said, I would like to switch to TRICARE Select. And it was a super fast conversation, and it was so easy. And I was blown away by how easy it was, because again, totally different people probably working in the TRICARE office at the hospital now than it was 2.5 years ago. But at that time, I remember going to the TRICARE office with my husband, and we asked them questions about switching so that I could give birth off base, and they were like, that is not a good idea. That's not how this works. And they gave me a lot of false information that made it sound like it was not a good idea. They discouraged it and kind of made me feel like I was a little crazy for trying to do that. Now, again, I think it's more common than it was at the time, perhaps, but I was made to feel that it was more difficult than it was. In reality, it was about a 5-minute call with TRICARE. They switched me over, and I was good to go. Another question or misconception that I faced at that time was I was like, oh, I've already got these appointments scheduled at Naval. I had a growth scan coming up because there was concern about my daughter being too small throughout my pregnancy when I was at Naval, by like a tiny margin, which didn't end up being a big deal at all. And she was born at a healthy 7 pounds. But that was a concern. So I had a growth scan coming up. I was also doing some monitoring because my blood pressure is borderline, whether I'm pregnant or not. So I was having to do fetal stress tests at Naval 2 times a week, which really stressed me out and elevated my blood pressure like no other. It improved dramatically when I was no longer doing those fetal stress tests. But I understand the reasoning for why I was asked to do them. But what was my point? Oh yes, so I had all of these appointments lined up, and I was like, I mean, I want to have the option to go to them. Maybe I want to. I haven't officially been accepted as a patient at YUI yet. So I was worried that all those appointments at Naval were going to be wiped, and then if I wasn't accepted at YUI, I would be out of luck. And that was a pointless concern. If you're TRICARE Select, you can still have appointments through the OB clinic. They will not turn you away. They make my appointments now that I've been Select for 2.5 years. I never switched back, and it's never been a problem at all. So going to, and kind of more about that in a second, because it does require a little bit more flexibility on my part being Select. But as far as the OB clinic is concerned, they don't treat me any differently. They don't now, they didn't then, they didn't cancel my appointments. I'm still able to make appointments successfully now that I'm being seen at both. So TRICARE Select is not gonna jack up your appointments at the hospital. Also, like I said, I never switched back to TRICARE Select because I thought, oh, what if I get pregnant again? And I have to wait on this perfect open enrollment period, and I just want to remain Select so that I'm covered and I can always give birth at YUI if I happen to get pregnant again. Well, in the span of that 2.5 years, after I had my daughter, I had some problems with my wrist, mommy wrist is what it's kind of casually called. Anyway, I went to the hospital. I had an IUD inserted. I had an IUD removed. I've had various appointments at the hospital, and being select just simply means that you're seen on a space available basis. And ironically, I've been seen faster for appointments since I've been select than I was when I was TRICARE Prime. It just, again, requires some flexibility because I don't have a PCM, so I'm not going to see the same person every time I have a doctor's appointment or an ailment of some sort, but I don't have a lot of appointments anyway, so I didn't care. It didn't really matter to me. So I don't personally see that as a big issue. Another misconception about being seen at YUI is that it's so expensive and you'll lose so much money, and that is not true. So I know that everybody's financial situation is different, so I don't want to say anybody can give birth at YUI. Yeah, you pay out of pocket and it's fine. I don't want to say that because I'm sure that's not true for everyone, and that would be really privileged of me to say anybody can do it. Okay, no, probably not. However, I do think that most people can, because I know for me, we use travel credit cards. I know a lot of people here in Okinawa do. We use credit cards where when we use it, we accrue points for travel, okay? You guys probably know how travel credit cards work. So for any things that I have done that have been a high expense here in Okinawa, I try to put it on either our Chase Sapphire or our American Express travel card and then pay it off right away. So for my birth, this next birth, that's going on that travel credit card. And then when my reimbursement comes in, I'll just pay it right back off. My reimbursement for the birth of my daughter only took about 30 days. So about by the time I would be paying interest on that, I could already go ahead and pay it off. And I got reimbursed for, I want to say it was like 98%. It was a huge percentage. It was, the amount that I didn't get reimbursed was negligible, not a big deal. And now it's kind of recently been discovered, people are posting it on the Birthing Off Base page, that you can actually submit reimbursement for your translator fees, which when I had my daughter, I didn't know was an option at all. So that was the chunk that I paid for. But even now, 2.5 years later, people have been asking their translators, could you give me a receipt for that? And submitting to TRICARE and getting reimbursed for that too. So if money is a concern, as long as you have a decent credit card balance or credit limit that you can use, and as long as you're a responsible person and you're not just gonna be like swipey swipe, whatever, and like never pay it off or not pay it off immediately when you get that money, you know, make that a priority. As long as you're going to be responsible with that, I don't really see paying out of pocket to be a deterrent. I think sometimes when we say pay out of pocket, it almost sounds like we need to have hard cash in hand to cover our births, and that's not what it is. So that to me also wasn't a really big deal. Also, kind of with the switching to select thing, to kind of go back to that, something I forgot to mention was I've heard people say, I'm not sure how common of a misconception this is, but I've heard people say, oh, well, I don't want to switch to select because what if I had an emergency and I needed to deliver at Naval, or I needed to go back to Naval, then I'd be locked in and I couldn't go there. And that is not true. That's not true. You're never going to go to the Naval Medical Center emergency room and they're going to go, ooh, should have thought of that before you went select. They're not going to do that. You are still a TRICARE patient. You are still a military family member. They are going to take care of you. So that if that is a more common misconception, then I think it is that's just simply not true. Also, one of the frequent concerns that I hear is that people say, oh, well, what if I had an emergency when I was at YUI and then I needed to be transferred and they took me to a Japanese hospital? To me, that was never a concern because, for one, Japan's infant mortality rate is lower than ours in the United States. The Japanese medical facilities and the care that they provide, is it a little different? Yeah. Is it good? Yes, it also is good. So I think that's sometimes something that we don't think about or realize or forget, is that if you, let's say you're being seen at the Naval Medical Center and you have a problem that they cannot adequately address in our facility here, in our military facility, they'll transfer you out in town if needed to get you the care that you need, that next level up that maybe we don't have the resources to provide here. So to say, I don't know, to say that, oh, well, I don't want to be transferred to a Japanese medical center kind of makes it seem like we believe that we're above that care and that our Naval Medical Center provides care that's above the care that's possible in Japan. And that might be true in a few isolated cases, but also our Naval Medical Center clearly has some faith in the Japanese hospitals, and that we routinely transfer people or regularly transfer people to Japanese medical centers when that's needed for that next level of care that we might not be able to offer. So to me, that's not a deterrent. And also when you're giving birth at YUI, you're supposed to have a translator there. I think now that's required. At the time when I had my daughter, it was highly suggested. I did have a translator because if something were to go wrong, I wouldn't want there to be any chance of there being a language barrier there. I would want to be able to easily communicate with someone. So having a translator present, I think, is now required. So if you were to need to transfer to a Japanese hospital, it's not like they're gonna stick you in an ambulance and be like, good luck out there. Like, you're gonna have someone there who can translate for you. So to me, that's not a huge concern. A lot of people make the decision, I think most people make the decision to deliver off base because they want that natural birth experience. And occasionally though, people will say, like, natural, like I can't have an epidural? No, that's not an option there. But you know, I guess that just depends on how you look at it. To me, I wanted that. I didn't want the option of an epidural because I felt like if it was readily offered to me every time I appeared to be in pain, I might just eventually be like, well, shoot, yeah, just give me the epidural. And that's not something that I really wanted. So I felt like I could kind of trap myself into my natural birth plan by being at YUI. But also it's so positive, it's gentle, people are caring. I'm not saying it's not painful. Of course it's painful, it's freaking childbirth. But you're in an environment where that's not an option, but I never felt like, oh, I can't have an epidural and right now I want one. I didn't feel like that because there were so many other comfort measures being taken that I didn't feel like that was necessary. Something else that's wonderful about YUI is the focus on breastfeeding as well, kind of to go in line with that focus on the natural side of childbirth. So no one is going to leave YUI not knowing if their baby is latching properly. You're going to leave knowing that you have a good latch when you go in for your postpartum appointment and your baby's first appointment after delivery. I don't remember when that is, a couple weeks, a month, I don't remember. That whole time frame is a blur, but they're gonna ensure that your breastfeeding is going successfully. And I really liked that. I liked that next level of support there. Again, not to say that Naval doesn't have wonderful lactation consultants. I've never worked with them or met with them, but they probably do. But at YUI, that's just kind of, that is built into it. You don't have to make an appointment to come see a lactation consultant. They're coming into your room and making sure that the baby is latching correctly. At your follow-up appointment, your first appointment after delivering your baby, they're making sure. It's not something that you have to go seek out as an extra added resource. It's built into, you had a baby, so you're also gonna need help with this too. So it's built into that, which I really, really liked. So my last little comments here would be if anyone actually makes it through what is turning out to be a really, really long video, I would also just like lastly to say, if you're considering giving birth at YUI or if you're considering, well, you have two options. So whichever option you take, I would highly suggest getting a doula. I can't say enough amazing things about my doula, Angel Diana Harrison, and she's the doula that I hired for my first birth. She'll be with us again for the birth of our second child, but you know, I'm sure that the perfect doula fit is out there for everyone. So I would highly encourage everyone to get a doula because they're the best and they're there to support you and to support your husband too. After I delivered my daughter, my husband was like, what would we have done without Diana? And my husband has seen childbirth. You know, this wasn't his first birth to see. He's a nurse. He's used to being in a medical setting, but he was like, this is different. I didn't know. Thank God for Diana. So doulas are absolutely amazing. All right, well, if anybody actually successfully watched this and made it all the way through, great. I hope it's helpful.